Duffield Cave Incident. On August 15, 2015, teenagers from Camp Wilderness went to explore Duffield Cave. Emma Jeffrey was 17 years old and one of the most experienced cavers in the group. Their youth group leader, Mr. Peterson, led them into the dark limestone cave. The first hour went well as they crawled through wide passages and large chambers. Then they reached a very difficult passage that local cavers called the pretzel. The pretzel was named this because it twisted and turned through the rock like a giant pretzel. The passage forced explorers to bend their bodies in almost impossible ways. It started as a low crawl, then curved up, twisted left, dropped down, bent right, and angled up again. Most of the group decided the pretzel looked too scary and turned back. But Emma had conquered difficult cave passages before and wanted to try it. She studied the twisted route and mapped it in her mind before entering. Emma entered head first, army crawling through the initial narrow section. Her headlamp showed smooth limestone walls that were just wide enough for her shoulders. The first upward turn went okay as she twisted her body and pushed with her feet. The left turn was harder as she had to rotate her entire body like a corkscrew. Her right shoulder pressed against one wall while her left hip touched the other. The downward section felt like sliding into a mail slot as the space got tighter. Her chest was compressed against the floor and her breathing became shallow. But the right turn was where everything went horribly wrong. Emma's body had twisted through all the previous sections perfectly until this moment. As she tried to make the right turn, her body simply ran out of room to move. Her right shoulder jammed against one wall and her left hip wedged against the other. Her legs couldn't find any way to push forward or pull backward. The limestone passage had become like a straitjacket holding her in place. Panic hit Emma as she realized she couldn't move in any direction. Every attempt to shift position only wedged her tighter into the twisted passage. Her heart pounded and her breathing became rapid and shallow. She tried to call for help, but her compressed chest could only make weak sounds. Finally, one of her friends noticed she hadn't come out of the passage. They called her name and realized Emma was trapped inside the pretzel. For the next 4 hours, her friends tried everything to rescue her. They pulled on her feet, but the twisted passage prevented straight line pulling. They pushed from behind, but this only made her more stuck. Someone brought water to pour around her body to make it slippery, but the limestone absorbed the water and Emma became dangerously cold. Hypothermia began setting in as her body temperature dropped. She started shivering uncontrollably, which made the tight space feel worse. Her thinking became confused and she began talking to the cave walls. Above ground, emergency vehicles arrived with police, firefighters, and paramedics, but none of the responders had experience with cave rescue. They sent their smallest firefighters into the cave, but they couldn't reach Emma. As the sun set, someone called experienced cave rescuers from the area. These expert cavers knew how to move through impossibly small spaces. The smallest rescuer reached Emma and analyzed the entire situation. The solution was simple but embarrassing. Emma's wet clothing was making her bigger. In the tight pretzel passage, even a half-inch difference meant the difference between freedom and imprisonment. The rescuers carefully removed most of Emma's clothing. They applied cooking oil to her skin to make it slippery against the rock. The extraction took another hour of careful, coordinated work. They had to support Emma's weight while guiding her through each twist. When Emma finally emerged, she was barely conscious from hypothermia and exhaustion. Paramedics wrapped her in warming blankets and gave her IV fluids. Emma spent 2 days in the hospital recovering from the ordeal. Maryland Mine Cave Incident. On May 25, 2003, Travis McKellis and his family were exploring an old abandoned mine in Idaho. Travis was 25 years old and an experienced climber who knew how to use ropes safely. While they were looking around the Maryland mine site, their dog ran ahead of the group. The curious dog fell into a deep mine shaft that was 125 feet deep. The family couldn't see or rescue their dog that day, so they went home. Travis decided to come back the next day with proper climbing equipment to save the dog. On May 26th, Travis returned to the mine with his family to attempt the rescue. He set up his ropes carefully using his years of climbing experience. His anchor points were solid and his equipment was properly arranged. Travis's family stayed at the surface to talk to him during his descent. The mine shaft was 125 feet deep, so they would lose sight of him quickly. Voice communication was their only way to stay in contact with Travis. Travis started rappelling down the shaft walls in a controlled descent. Everything seemed to be going according to plan at first. But abandoned mine shafts can have invisible, deadly dangers. Over many years, dangerous gases had settled in the bottom of the shaft. These heavy gases had pushed out all the oxygen that people need to breathe. The deeper Travis went down, the more dangerous the air became. Halfway down the shaft, Travis started feeling that something was wrong. His breathing became difficult and his head felt light and dizzy. "The air is getting thin," Travis called up to his family with concern in his voice. As he continued going down, the lack of oxygen began affecting his brain. Oxygen starvation makes people lose consciousness before they realize the danger. Travis's experienced climbing mind started shutting down from lack of oxygen. At the bottom of the shaft, Travis found a sloping passage leading away. He crawled into the narrow passage on his knees looking for his dog. But his brain wasn't working properly because of the bad air. He didn't realize he was walking into a deadly trap. The sloping passage had even less oxygen than the main main shaft. Travis lost consciousness within moments of entering the passage. His body struggled against oxygen starvation but couldn't survive. The lack of oxygen shut down his brain and basic life functions. His family above called frantically but got no response from Travis. The rope hung motionless, and they realized something terrible had happened. They couldn't help Travis without entering the same dangerous environment. The family called professional search and rescue teams for help. The rescue teams knew they needed special breathing equipment to enter safely. A professional rescuer with an air pack was lowered into the shaft. The air pack gave the rescuer clean air independent of the deadly shaft atmosphere. At the bottom, the rescuer found Travis's body in the confined space. Travis had died from hypoxia, which means death from a lack of oxygen. There were no signs of injuries or equipment failure, just oxygen starvation. The recovery team carefully brought Travis's body up the 125-foot shaft. His family was devastated by losing both their dog and Travis. Empire Mine Cave Incident. On September 24, 2005, 8 researchers went to explore Empire Mine Cave in Sequoia National Park. The team included Shane Fryer, Mindy Goldberg, Dave Bunnell, and Joel Despain. They wanted to study and photograph old silver mine ruins hidden underground. Empire Mine Cave has a vertical entrance that requires ropes to get down safely. Unlike regular caves you can walk into, this one drops straight down like a deep hole. The team set up their rope systems and checked all their safety equipment carefully. Each person needed harnesses, helmets, headlamps, and special climbing gear. Shane went down first to test the ropes and make sure everything was safe. His descent went smoothly and he reached the bottom without any problems. Mindy followed Shane down the entrance pit and landed safely at the bottom. She continued past Shane's position to explore a narrow chimney passage deeper in the cave. A chimney passage is a narrow vertical space between cave walls, and you have to use your back, feet, and hands against the walls to climb up or down. Dave Bunnell, who was 53 years old and very experienced, started his descent next. His rappel down the entrance pit went perfectly according to plan. Dave reached the bottom safely and began climbing down the chimney passage where Mindy had gone. Suddenly, a large rock that had been stable for years broke loose from the cave wall. The falling rock struck Dave and pinned his backpack against the wall. The rock also trapped Dave's leg in the narrow chimney passage. Dave couldn't move freely and was stuck under the weight of the heavy stone. Using his years of caving experience, Dave stayed calm and worked to free himself. He carefully figured out how to move without causing more rocks to fall. Through strength and determination, Dave managed to escape from the rock's grip. But when Dave got free, he discovered an even bigger problem. The fallen rock had settled in a new position that completely blocked the chimney passage. Below the rock, Mindy was now trapped in the lower section of the chimney. The rock blocked her path back up and she couldn't reach her team members. The sound of the rockfall brought Joel Despain hurrying down to help. Cave rescues are very difficult because of the tight spaces and limited access. The team had to work with whatever tools and skills they had available. Dave, Shane, and Joel faced a life-or-death engineering problem. The rock blocking Mindy's escape was too heavy for one person to move, but they had to move it enough to create space for Mindy to climb out. The 3 men worked together to figure out how to move the massive rock. They used leverage and coordinated force in the confined chimney space. Moving the rock was difficult because they couldn't bring heavy equipment into the cave. They had to use human strength and basic tools available in the cave. Throughout the rescue, they talked to Mindy to keep her calm and informed. Communication was important to prevent panic and coordinate their efforts. Finally, the 3 men managed to create just enough space above the rock. The gap was very small, but it was enough for Mindy to squeeze through. Mindy had to climb up, over, and out of the tight passage very carefully. She needed precise body positioning to avoid getting stuck again. Mindy successfully squeezed through the gap and escaped to safety. The team tried to move the rock back to its original position, but the rock was too heavy and they couldn't restore the passage. The rockfall had permanently changed the cave's layout in just seconds. With everyone safely reunited, the team focused on exiting the cave. All 8 team members reached the surface safely. Grim Reaper Cave Incident. 3 friends, Mark, Jason, and Luke, set out on a weekend caving trip. They wanted to explore the Grim Reaper Cave, known for its narrow, tight passages. The cave was famous for producing strange wailing sounds when wind blew through it. The group's preparation was poor. They had only cheap, flickering torches and no proper gear. As they crawled deeper into the cave, they realized the narrow tunnels were much tighter than expected. Mark noticed how the jagged rocks formed a twisted. The path was very tight and dangerous. Sharp edges jutted out, threatening to scrape anyone who passed through. Despite the clear risk, Mark pressed on. Mark was convinced he could squeeze through without getting caught. About 30 minutes in, disaster struck. Mark, who was leading the way, slipped and wedged himself between 2 jagged rocks. His body was squeezed so tightly that the rocks dug painfully into his sides. He couldn't move at all. Behind him, Jason was blocked completely. Jason's arm was pinned beneath Mark's body. The cave walls seemed to press in, growing narrower with every second. Luke, the last in line, realized how serious their situation was. He tried his best to free Jason, but his efforts didn't work. With Jason stuck just behind Mark, the situation seemed impossible. Luke could feel the air quality getting getting worse as the tunnel became more oppressive. If he didn't act quickly, Mark could suffocate and Jason would panic completely. Luke decided to leave his friends and go for help. The journey back would be long, and every second felt like a lifetime. Rescue efforts began the moment Luke reached the surface. He was breathless and frantic as he explained the situation to the local search and rescue team. Within an hour, a specialized cave rescue arrived. They had advanced tools designed for this type of rescue. Upon entering the cave, the rescue team used a device to measure air quality inside. The oxygen levels were dropping dangerously. High concentrations of carbon dioxide were building up. The team went into the cave with specialized rock drills and inflatable air bladders. These air bladders could be placed between rock walls and slowly inflated. This would create just enough space to free the trapped body parts. Mark's chest was compressed by the rocks, making it difficult for him to breathe fully. The rescuers knew they needed to act fast to prevent internal injuries. The challenge was to widen the crevice without making the cave collapse. As the rescue team drilled into the surrounding rock, they carefully controlled vibrations. The rescuers started with Jason. They gently positioned a rescue harness around his body. Using a pulley system, they began pulling Jason backward. Jason could barely breathe with his chest pressing against the stone. After several tense minutes, Jason was finally pulled free. Now the rescuers could focus on Mark. Mark was wedged tightly between jagged rocks that pressed painfully into his sides. The team had to work quickly and precisely, and they inserted an air bladder to create enough space between Mark and the rock. Once the rocks were pried apart just enough, they slipped a rescue harness around Mark's body. With careful coordination, they applied steady tension using the rope system. Every tug was painful for Mark as his body scraped against the sharp stone. After what felt like an eternity, they finally pulled him free. He was bloodied and bruised, but alive. They quickly wrapped him in an emergency thermal blanket. Jason followed closely behind with his arms swollen but functional. As the men reached the surface, medics immediately treated them. Both were hypothermic and severely dehydrated, but alive. Smith's crack cave incident. On the morning of June 17, 2004, Steve Alburn and a group of friends set out for an adventure in Smith's Crack Cave in Idaho. They hiked through the forest to reach the cave entrance. Steve was a big man at 6 feet 2 inches and 250 pounds. As they went into the cave, Steve easily slid down a narrow slot into a lower passage. Gravity helped pull him through on the way down. They explored the cave for hours and finally decided to go back. The same narrow slot that had been easy to go down now trapped Steve by his chest. With gravity no longer helping, every inch upward felt like a battle. His large frame was wedged tight against the jagged rock walls. His chest was completely stuck, pinned tightly between the sharp walls of the cave. His lungs had little room to expand. His ribs felt like they were slowly being crushed. Each attempted movement only made the pressure worse. Sharp jolts of pain shot through his body. Steve's face was pressed painfully against the cold, jagged rock. His breathing became difficult. To make matters worse, Steve's legs were stuck in a horizontal position within the narrow passage. This left his body twisted in a way no human body should bend. His friends tried to pull him free, but gravity was no longer on his side. Every attempt only caused more pain. Hours passed and hope began to fade. The group finally called for help. Rescue crews arrived and tried repeatedly to free Steve, but nothing worked. His body was wedged too tightly. Finally, in a moment of desperation, someone suggested using vegetable shortening to grease him up. With no better options, rescuers grabbed coveralls and coated them with Crisco. The rescuers prepared themselves for the effort. They started to pull from above while his friend behind kept pushing. Steve, wearing the greasy suit, started to slide upward. Every movement sent sharp, searing pain through his ribs and spine, but he had to keep going. Slowly, painfully, the grease began to do its job. Inch by inch, the walls began to release their grip on his body. Steve's arms were grabbed by those pulling from above. With each tug, he screamed in pain as the rough stone scraped against his skin. Steve's body finally started to come free completely. After nearly 10 hours of pain, Steve emerged from the cave. He was battered, bruised, and shaken, but alive. Lake McDonald Cave Incident. On November 1st, 2020, a diving accident happened at Lake McDonald in Glacier National Park. Linnea Mills was part of a group of divers that included instructor Debbie Snow, trainee Bob Gentry, and a 14-year-old known as E.G. They were set to dive into Lake McDonald to practice high-altitude and cold water diving skills. Linnea had bought a second-hand dry suit. A dry suit is essential gear meant to keep divers warm by trapping air between the body and cold water. Unfortunately, her suit was missing a crucial part, the inflator hose. Without it, Linnea wouldn't be able to add air to her suit as she went down. This would cause the suit to squeeze tightly due to water pressure. Neither Linnea nor her instructors realized the missing equipment during pre-dive checks. The instructors skipped proper gear checks and a pre-dive briefing. Linnea was also carrying 44 pounds of lead weights in her dry suit and buoyancy control device pockets. When they entered the water, However, Linnea began struggling almost immediately. The cold water squeezed the air out of her suit, making it difficult to move and breathe. As the group went deeper, the situation got worse. She couldn't control her buoyancy properly. The pressure of the water made it even harder for her to breathe. At one point, she signaled for help, but her instructor didn't notice. A fellow diver, Bob Gentry, saw her sinking out of control. Gentry tried to catch up to her, reaching her at a depth of 26 meters. He could see she was in severe trouble. In the struggle, she lost her regulator, her main source of air. Gentry tried to share his air with her, but they were running out fast. At a depth of 32 meters, Gentry faced a life or death decision. He had to abandon his efforts and return to the surface or risk dying himself. Gentry made a rapid ascent, surfacing in less than a minute. This was a dangerous move that put him at risk for decompression sickness. Meanwhile, at the surface, Snow and Liston were still unaware of the life-threatening situation below. When Gentry finally emerged, he frantically alerted Snow to the emergency, but by this time, the fading light and cold temperatures made the search even more difficult. Eventually, Linnea's lifeless body was found at a depth of 39 meters. After her death, Linnea's family filed a $12 million negligence lawsuit. The lawsuit was against the dive school, its instructors, and PADI worldwide.